On the streets of Los Angeles during the 1980s, a predator was on the loose. He looked like an ordinary man, a neighbor, a mechanic, a family man. But the truth was, he would lure women into his car, kill them, and keep their photos as souvenirs. The police couldn't find him. And then suddenly, the murders stopped for 14 years. People thought he had quit. But the reality was far more terrifying. This is the true story of the grim sleeper, Lonnie David Franklin Jr. The case of Lonnie David Franklin Jr. The story of Lonnie David Franklin Jr. is no less than a Hollywood horror film, but it is tragically real. It's the story of a man who appeared to be a simple neighbor, a mechanic, and a family man, but inside, he was a monster who terrorized the streets of South Central Los Angeles. He got the nickname the Grim Sleeper because it was believed he took a long 14-year break between his murders, as if he had fallen asleep. But the reality was he never truly slept. He was just waiting for his next opportunity. Lonnie David Franklin Jr. was born on August 30th, 1952, in Los Angeles, California. He was born in a city that would later become his hunting ground. He was raised in the South Central area of Los Angeles, which at the time was the heart of the African American community. This area would later be consumed by gang violence and the crack epidemic in the 1980s, creating a strange parallel between the innocence of his childhood and the horror of his future crimes. Very little is publicly known about his parents or childhood, as if he intentionally kept his early days shrouded in darkness. What is known is that he was part of an ordinary family, where he developed his fascination with cars, a skill that would later prove crucial for carrying out his attacks and disposing of bodies. During his school years, Lonnie didn't stand out from his peers in any way. He attended local schools in South Central LA. Teachers and friends might remember him as a quiet, average boy, with no clear signs pointing to the terrifying future that lay ahead. His main interest at the time was in mechanical things. Understanding and fixing cars was his hobby. This hobby gradually became his identity, but behind this identity, a deep darkness was growing, one that would rob dozens of families of their peace for decades to come. After finishing school, Lonnie David Franklin Jr. decided to enlist in the U.S. Army. For many young people, this is a path to honor and discipline, but for Franklin, it was just the beginning of his dark descent. He was stationed in Stuttgart, West Germany. It was there, in April 1974, that an incident occurred which laid the foundation for his future crimes. One night, Franklin and two of his army buddies asked a 17-year-old girl for directions and offered to give her a ride home. The girl accepted their offer, a decision that would prove to be the biggest mistake of her life. The three soldiers took her to a deserted field, held a knife to her throat, and gang-raped her. This incident not only revealed his violent tendencies but also brought another horrifying element to light. During the rape, one of them took pictures of the girl. Years later, Franklin would also take pictures of the women he tortured and killed. It was a terrifying pattern that started in Germany and would end in Los Angeles. The girl bravely pretended to be interested in Franklin to get his phone number, which she later gave to the police. Franklin was caught, and a German court sentenced him to 3 years and 4 months in prison. However, he didn't serve his full sentence and was released from prison in July 1975, receiving a dishonorable discharge from the army. His accomplices served their full sentences, but for some reason, Franklin was released early. This was the first major warning sign in a life that the American justice system would ultimately ignore. After returning to America, Franklin tried to live a normal life in Los Angeles. He married a Belgian woman named Sylvia and had 2 children. He began working as a mechanic. In the 1980s, he worked for the City of Los Angeles Sanitation Department, and then, from 1981 to 1988, he worked in the garage of the Los Angeles Police Department. It was a bitter irony that this man, working in the LAPD garage, was simultaneously preying on women in the very same city. To his neighbors, he was a helpful, friendly guy who would fix their cars for cheap. But behind this mask of normalcy lurked a predator, waiting for his moment. Lonnie Franklin chose his victims carefully. His targets were young black women who were among the most vulnerable in society. The 1980s in South Central LA was the era of the crack cocaine epidemic. Many women, trapped by addiction, were forced into prostitution to support their habit. For Franklin, these women were easy prey. He knew that society and the police wouldn't pay as much attention to their disappearances or deaths as they would if the victims were white women from affluent neighborhoods. This was the cruelest part of his plan. He knew his victims would be overlooked and unheard. He would approach his victims, offering friendship or a ride in his car. Sometimes he offered them a lift, other times he tempted them with money for sex. Once a woman was in his car, he would drive her to a secluded spot and overpower her. His weapon of choice was often a .25 caliber pistol, which he would use to shoot his victims in the chest. In some cases, especially in later years, he also strangled his victims, as if his violence was becoming even more grotesque. He would often have sex with them before killing them. Another horrifying aspect of his routine was taking photographs of his victims. He kept these photos as souvenirs, like a hunter mounting the antlers of his kill on the wall. By the mid-1980s, a quiet terror had settled over the streets of Los Angeles, a silence of death. On August 10, 1985, the body of 29-year-old Deborah Jackson was found near a trash pile in an alley in South Central LA. She had been shot 3 times in the chest. This was the beginning of the 10 known murders for which Franklin was convicted. Over the next 3 years, the murders of Henrietta Wright, 35, Barbara Ware, 23, Bernita Sparks, 26, Mary Lowe, 26, Lacrisha Jefferson, 22, and Alicia Monique Alexander, 18, would follow. All of these women were killed in a similar manner, their bodies dumped in alleys with gunshot wounds to the chest. In November 1988, an event occurred that would be a major setback for Franklin, though he didn't know it at the time. A 30-year-old woman named Anitra Washington was on her way to a friend's house when Franklin offered her a ride. He seemed harmless to her, an ordinary guy in a simple shirt and pants. But shortly after, he shot her in the chest, then beat and sexually assaulted her. He took a picture of the dying Anitra and threw her from the car, believing she was dead. But Anitra didn't give up. She managed to get help and became the only known living survivor of the grim sleeper. She gave police a precise description of her attacker. A black man, clean-cut, wearing a black polo shirt and khaki pants. After this incident, it seemed as if Franklin had retired from crime. For the next 14 years, there were no known murders linked to him, which is why he earned the nickname the Grim Sleeper. However, later investigations revealed he hadn't been asleep at all, but had likely become even more cautious. Photos and evidence found in his home suggest he may have continued his violence during this period. He resurfaced in 2002. This time his victim was 15-year-old Princess Bertha Muir, who was sexually assaulted and strangled, her naked body dumped in an alley. She was followed by Valerie McCorvey, 35, in 2003 and Janicia Peters, 25, in 2007. Janicia's body was found sealed in a trash bag. His method had shifted slightly. He was now strangling his victims instead of shooting them, but the signature of leaving their bodies in alleys remained. As early as the mid-1980s, the LAPD realized a serial killer was active in South Central LA. They initially dubbed the murders the work of the Southside Slayer and believed they were all connected to one person. But the investigation moved slowly. Meanwhile, another serial killer, the Night Stalker Richard Ramirez, was active in the same area from 1984 to 1985, targeting white women in affluent neighborhoods. The police and media were intensely focused on the Ramirez case, while the murders of black women in South Central LA didn't receive the same attention. This disparity drove an activist named Margaret Prescott and her group, the Black Coalition Fighting Back Serial Murders, to take to the streets. They held constant protests outside LAPD headquarters, accusing the police of not taking these murders seriously. It was due to their pressure that the police eventually formed a task force to investigate the killings and increased the reward money. Over time, it became clear that the Southside Slayer wasn't one person, but possibly several killers. However, There was a pattern of murders committed with a .25 caliber pistol that didn't seem to connect to anyone else. These included the deaths of Deborah Jackson and Henrietta Wright. The investigation was also plagued by mistakes. A sheriff's detective, Ricky Ross, was even arrested for some of these murders based on faulty ballistic evidence, but was later released. After the murder of Janicia Peters in 2007, the LAPD quietly formed the 800 Task Force. Forensic science had advanced significantly by then. DNA was extracted from saliva found on Janicia's body, and when it was entered into the database, it matched DNA from at least 10 other unsolved murders from the 1980s. In 2008, LA Weekly journalist Christine Pelisek broke the story about the task force's existence and the reactivation of a serial killer. It was Pelisek who gave the unknown killer the nickname the Grim Sleeper. DNA technology played a crucial role in catching the Grim Sleeper, but the path was not straightforward. Police had a DNA profile from the crime scenes, but it didn't match anyone in California's criminal database. Here's a bitter irony. In 2003, Franklin himself had been convicted in a theft case and was on probation. In 2004, California passed Proposition 69, which mandated DNA collection from all felons. But due to a lack of resources, Franklin's DNA wasn't collected until 2005. This way, a golden opportunity to catch him slipped away. Investigators then turned to a new and controversial technique: familial DNA searching. They searched the database for DNA profiles that, while not an exact match to the crime scene DNA, were similar enough to suggest a close relative. This search paid off. The DNA profile of Christopher Franklin, arrested in 2008 on a weapons charge, was a close match to the Grim Sleeper's DNA. Christopher was too young to be the killer, but this led police to focus on his father, Lonnie David Franklin Jr. Now the challenge for the police was to obtain Franklin's DNA. An undercover operation was launched. In July 2010, an undercover officer posed as a waiter at a restaurant where Franklin was attending a birthday party with his family. The officer collected Franklin's used plate, glass, fork, and most importantly, a half-eaten piece of pizza and a napkin. The DNA from these items was tested and matched perfectly with the crime scene DNA. Based on this, Lonnie David Franklin Jr. was arrested at his home on July 7, 2010. A search of his home revealed evidence that spoke to the horror of his crimes. Police found hundreds of photos and many hours of video footage, mostly featuring black women, many in various states of undress, and many appearing unconscious or dead. The photos were decades old, and police believed many of these women could be additional victims of Franklin's. The gun used in the murder of Janicia Peters was also recovered from his home. After Lonnie Franklin's arrest, it took considerable time for his trial to begin. Finally, in February 2016, his hearing commenced in Los Angeles Superior Court. Prosecutor Beth Silverman presented horrific photos to the jury. Anitra Washington, now 57, testified in court, reliving the terror of that night in 1988. DNA evidence, ballistic evidence, and the photos from Franklin's home connected him to the crimes. Defense attorney Seymour Amster challenged the evidence, suggesting the real killer was some mystery man whose DNA was found. But convincing the jury of that was a tall order. After a trial lasting nearly 3 months, the jury delivered its verdict after just a day and a half of deliberation on May 5, 2016. Lonnie David Franklin Jr. was found guilty of 10 murders and 1 count of attempted murder. The names of the 10 women he was convicted of murdering were Deborah Jackson, Henrietta Wright, Barbara Ware, Bernita Sparks, Mary Lowe, Lacrisha Jefferson, Alicia Alexander, Princess Bertha Muir, Valerie McCorvey, and Janicia Peters. The next phase was determining the sentence. During the penalty phase, prosecutors presented evidence of 5 additional murders to prove that Franklin was not only guilty but so dangerous that he could not be left alive. On June 6, 2016, the jury unanimously recommended that Franklin be sentenced to death. On August 10, 2016, the Los Angeles Superior Court judge formally sentenced him to death for all 10 murders. The Grim Sleeper was sent to San Quentin State Prison in California to await his execution. But he was not destined to see the end of his sentence. On March 28, 2020, at the age of 67, Lonnie David Franklin Jr. was found dead in his cell. An investigation determined his death was from natural causes related to heart disease and hypertension. And so ended the story of the man who had taken the lives of at least 10 innocent women, orphaned dozens of families, and planted a seed of terror in the hearts of his own community that may never fully disappear. With his death, many families were left with unhealable wounds and a mountain of unanswered questions, the biggest one being, why? In the words of Princess Berthamura's sister, Samara Herard, it just seems so unfair. Why did he get to die naturally? Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you can be the first to hear about such real-life stories.